not going to take 80, and you're going to make
Morning, Farge.
you
Good
know,
morning
split
sa
the differences for your own
Pilipinas. Good
political
morning, good
profit,
morning.
or are you going to come together and we'll see. I mean, that's
Joe
truly
Biden
my
is
belief
win now.
that you know,
Congratulations, Joe
It's
Biden,
also so. I'm just
for
again.
president.
We've just come through a campaign where on
You
the
can see
Democratic
that
side
in
we did not see
the
large
TV,
gatherings of
CNN.
people. I obviously during the protests this summer there were large gatherings of people in the streets. But to see these crowds this morning, the diversity of the crowds, a lot of mask wearing, which is certainly a good thing. Obviously, not social distancing, and over the last several days, there hasn't been, because we've had this election, but it bears repeating. If we are in the midst of
this country's been a pressure cooker for the last 4 years. Donald Trump has had his hand on that, and this is the sense of relief there.
Totally. And the great thing about it is, it's coming out in joy. And I use that word joy over and over again because that's like a word in the movement. The young people. There's Adrian Marie Brown is this young kind of Instagram star who's been talking about this politics of joy. And these artists have been going out. Remember all those long lines? They're bringing the pizza. They're also bringing music. They're bringing dance. All these memes and stuff. They've created a basis of a positive culture. And so I think that that's good. And again, so you got to look for the good, look for the positive, look for the hopeful. These are hopeful. They're not out there mad. They're not out there. They're out there celebrating democracy. Let's build with those people. And people right now who are mourning, let's make sure they know they've got to play. If you want, come out to the party. Come out to the party. This is about America. It's not about versus Trump. It's about America. Come out to the party.
Wow, thank you. Happy victory of Joe Biden. Correct. Correct, guys. We need to celebrate today for the victory.
That has been his message, and these are people who clearly
I'm
want to
happy.
celebrate. They are masked, I'm seeing, but who knows? They're close together. But there's a celebration going on. Change sometimes brings that out in you, and I think
We need to watch this.
If
This is
Donald
the
Trump was
victory
won,
of Joe
his
Biden.
supporters will probably be celebrating too. I'm not.
We need peace.
I'm not saying that this belongs
We need love.
to one side or another.
We need respect.
But
There would be the same sense of relief against supporters in the same sense of more trucks. There'll be more trucks. They have the trucks and the caravan and stuff like that. But look, I just think so many people work so hard. Again, this particular the way that the Biden campaign functioned really let a lot of people just kind of do their own thing. It wasn't a super top-down thing. You had Biden. There was a circle around him moving him forward. But in a pandemic, you couldn't do it the normal way. So people just started creating their own stuff. There's a campaign called With Love that I was a part of. People just made their own ads.
Can I just make one point on this? Jen O'Malley Dillon, the manager of this campaign, came in after the primary, could not meet with her staff, could not meet with her candidate, had to organize in the midst of a pandemic, take a campaign that was underfunded and underorganized, and turn it into a winning campaign, and did a remarkable job. First woman, I think, who's ever managed a winning presidential race. Did a remarkable job in transforming this campaign under the most difficult circumstances any manager has ever faced. And that's right, Kellyanne Conway, my apologies. But, this task was just so prodigious, and it needs to be said, what she and the entire team did to take the campaign from where it was in the primary to where it is today, a winning campaign. Remarkable accomplishment.
And you can't forget too, in the primary he was going down. As I said, he went from being a joke to a juggernaut. So you've got to give some credit to Clyburn.
a lot of credit.
Stood up and Clyburn said, "Hey guys, some credit."
Some credit.
Even Santorum's going to get all credit.
I'm just saying,
taking Jim out there. Jim Clyburn.
But Jim Clyburn reached out and said, "Look, this is our guy. Let's get around this guy." But that meant that from the very beginning, the campaign was a little bit different than a normal winning primary campaign, and it brought that spirit of ordinary people in.
And they stayed on message. They didn't sort of, go after every bright, shiny object, go after every tweet. They just kind of stayed on their message. They talked about COVID. They talked about health care. Even when it came to the Supreme Court, on the Supreme Court nominee, they stuck to what they knew.
Message, discipline,
People
from Joe Biden.
cared about. Messages from Joe Biden. Think about
Yeah,
that.
we should also talk about, I mean, this is probably impolitic to say, but the fact is, there are a lot of people who are nervous. I wrote about what the campaign needed to be doing during the pandemic, because if the president had seized the platform and led the country through this pandemic in a way that broadened his base, that could be a problem. But what really happened was Biden was relatively quiet for many months, and the president had the stage to himself. That turned out to be a plus for Biden.
Let's go back to Jake in DC. Jake?
All right, Anderson, the congratulations are starting to come from not just prominent Democrats, but prominent Republicans. We heard from former Ohio Governor John Kasich, obviously, a few minutes ago on our air. Jeb Bush, the former governor of Florida and who ran for president and lost in the primaries to Donald Trump, writes, "Congratulations to President-elect Biden. I have prayed for our president most of my adult life. I will be praying for you and your success. Now is the time to heal deep wounds. Many are counting on you to lead the way." A lovely statement from Jeb Bush. It would be nice if we heard similar from current Republican office holders, not just former. But it is a nice thing to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you caught this as you read it. The second line, "I've prayed for our president most of my adult life."
Well, I'm sure he prayed. I'm
The
sure he prayed
entire
for.
adult life.
I'm sure he prayed for Donald Trump as well.
Yeah.
There was no love lost there.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And listen, obviously the goal of this tweet was to lead by example and to show what class looks like, which is frankly how the Bushes have historically seen this. His father, George H.W. Bush, was the last one-term president. There is no love lost, but that is somebody who is trying to kind of, shout from the rooftops, "Please follow." I'm interested to see when, if his brother, the former president, does something
He will.
similar.
Yeah, he will.
I'm curious about when.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of Republicans, let's be honest, probably feel exactly the same way as Jeb Bush does. I don't agree with all of Joe Biden's policies, but, I think Bush is saying here in this tweet, I think you can do the job. And, and frankly, I'm okay with you doing the job. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were many sitting Republicans in the United States Senate who are looking at the situation and they're saying, the chances of us holding on to the Senate are pretty good. They like that. They like having control, the reins of the pace of the judiciary. They like having a brake valve for the Congress in general. And they're okay with a president who is less erratic, who has given them a lot of heartburn over the last 4 years, if you're being honest. President Trump has not made the life of some Republican senators in particularly easy. And a Joe Biden presidency, though they disagree, would be seen, even I think, in Congress as a relief for some.
Not being chased after in the hallways about every tweet that the leader of their party
That they
puts
had
out
not
there
seen.
is going to be a really, not to say that he's not going to be tweeting. He is going to be tweeting. He's just not going to be
They don't have
as the president.
Yeah, they don't have to lie to reporters anymore and say they haven't seen the tweet. They can just oppose Joe Biden's policies or try to work with them. Let's go outside the White House. President Trump, as far as we know, is still golfing. But outside the White House, there is quite a crowd of celebrants. Vivian Salama is in the crowd covering this for us. Vivian, tell us what you're seeing.
Hey, Jake, that's right. Outside the White House, we're about 100 feet outside the north side of the White House right now. And within seconds of CNN and other news organizations calling the race for Biden, the crowd started flowing into this area of downtown D.C. Now, for folks who are not familiar with D.C., I want to sort of paint the picture. I'm standing at the corner of H Street and 16th Street in Northwest, which was renamed Black Lives Matters Plaza. And so right behind me, you see crowds now gathering all the way down Black Lives Matters Plaza, chanting and cheering for Joe Biden. And that celebration has continued as we've been here. Folks cheering when the race was called, when some news organizations called the state of Nevada for Biden, then the chants started transition. Some interesting chants as well. We heard the crowd a few moments ago chanting for Stacey Abrams, celebrating the role that she has played in Georgia to help get Democrats in the forefront of this race and potentially flip that state. And so this crowd is growing by the second. And you can see, it's hard for us to see where we're standing, but we can't even see the end of it. On Black Lives Matter Plaza, the crowd stretches all the way down, and they continue to go, Jake. So I think we're going to see a lot more celebrations in the hours ahead.
That's right, a lot of celebrations in a spot where not long ago protesters were being gassed so that President Trump could walk to the church there. Vivian, why don't you walk around the crowd there a little bit if you can? Let us see a little bit more.
We're going to try, Jake. Our signal is very fragile. We'll try to walk around and take you through. Our signal is very fragile right now, but we're going to try to walk around and hopefully we don't lose you. But here we go. If we can take a little walk here, you can see some of these signs around here. A lot of signs. They're fired. Echoing President Trump's signature from his popular reality show. Hopefully you can. Every single time with you.
All right, yeah, we're losing this. We're losing the signal. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Probably a lot of satellite action going on there right now.
A lot of people down there.
A lot of people down there. A lot of cell phones. I want to read some of the more some of the celebratory and congratulatory notes that are coming in. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and a close ally of President Trump, somebody kind of in the mold of President Trump. This is going to sting for President Trump. Sending a note saying congratulations to Joe Biden on his election as President of the United States and to Kamala Harris on her historic achievement. The U.S. is our most important ally, and I look forward to working closely together on our shared priorities from climate change to trade and security. That's going to leave a mark.
Yep.
And then former President Bill Clinton, less of a surprise. America has spoken, democracy is one. Now we have a president-elect and vice president-elect who will serve all of us and bring us all together. Congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on your momentous victory.
And Jake, just in the last couple of days, our colleague Christina Alessi has been doing some reporting about what's going on in the business world and how they're looking at this period that could be actually quite unstable for the United States, in which you have a president-elect and a sitting president who may not concede, and they've made it very clear they're going to try to inch towards stability as much as possible, even to the point potentially of weighing in to say respect the results of the election.
So there's a new statement from
Correct.
Obama.
You need to respect.
44th President of the United States and the former boss of now President-elect Joe Biden, saying I could not be prouder to
Respect.
congratulate our new
Hi,
President,
Lynn.
Joe Biden, and our
How
next
are
President,
you?
Jill Biden. I also couldn't be prouder to congratulate Kamala Harris and Doug
Thank
Trump
you.
for Kamala's groundbreaking election as our next vice president. In this election, under circumstances never experienced.
Thank you for
America's
drop by
turnaround
for my
in
channels,
seen
Lynn
measures
and
of
Menu
pandemic
Recipe
and it was such a
and
great
Dean
turnout. And once every
Music
vote is counted, President-elect
and
Biden
Gina.
and
Thank you.
President-elect Harris will have won a historic and decisive victory. We're fortunate that Joe's got what it
We
takes
need
be
to
president
celebrate
of
our
a
new
series of
president.
because when he walks into the White House in January, he'll face
Oh,
a
wow.
series of extraordinary challenges
Woo!
no incoming president ever has. A raging pandemic, an unequal economy and justice system, a democracy at risk, and a climate in peril. I know he'll do the job with the best interests of every American at heart, whether or not he had their vote. So I encourage every American to give him a chance and lend him your support. The election results at every level show that the country remains deeply and bitterly divided. It will be up to not just Joe and Kamala, but each of us to do our part to reach out beyond our comfort zone, to listen to others, to lower the temperature, and find some common ground from which to move forward. All of us remembering that we are one nation under God.
Correct. One nation, one God.
Worked,
Unite.
organized and volunteered for the Biden campaign, every American who got involved in their own way, and everybody who voted for the first time. Your efforts made a difference. Enjoy this moment. Then stay engaged. I know it can be exhausting.
One
but for
nation.
democracy to endure requires our active citizenship and sustained focus on the issues, not just in an election season, but all the days in between. Our democracy needs all of us more than ever, and Michelle and I look forward to supporting our next president and first lady however we can. A lovely and characteristically expansive remarks from President Obama.
But that coming from a president who inherited the worst economic recession since the Great Depression says a lot.
Yeah.
And it's true. We've never had a pandemic like this in 100 years, and the economic fallout has been as significant. So he understands what that really is like, and it's worse now because I don't know that our country was as divided in 2008 as it is now politically.
I didn't feel it because we had just elected the nation's first black president.
Yeah.
It felt like the nation had come together in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Then a couple years later, in 2010,
Wow.
when everything changed. I just also want to take a moment to talk about the effort that President Obama put in to getting his vice president elected to the presidency. He did it 4 years ago for Hillary Clinton. In fact, he said, "This is personal for me," to people in the
I love
press.
it.
And
I love it.
It didn't work. This time it did. A lot of reasons for that. But in terms of President Obama, starting with the Democratic convention, he broke all protocols because he thought that President Trump broke all norms in a very dangerous way. And I say broken recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine if George W. Bush, in what presidents do in
Precisely.
Ukraine, Barack Obama did not choose to do that.
Yeah, no, he didn't, and he had no choice. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, he was as much a part of this campaign as Joe Biden was, because Donald Trump's presidency began about Barack Obama and who he was, and Donald Trump's presidency was in large part about the invalidation of the Obama era. And so this was not just about electing Joe Biden, but about preserving or restoring some of the things that he did as president that had been lost in a Donald Trump presidency. And but I do want to refer to one thing that he talked about in his statement, which is the turnout in this election. Not as a political statement, but just as a statement of fact that when you let Americans vote, when you give them ways to vote, they will vote, and they do vote. And Republicans for many years have taken the opposite stance, trying to make it more difficult for people to vote for a number of reasons. They say it's because of fraud. But I think when you really talk to them privately, they acknowledge it's because they're concerned that there are not enough people who support their views who show up at the polls, and that it is a political strategy about raw power. But I do think that if there's one thing Donald Trump proved in this election, you can turn out Republicans too, if you give them a chance to vote. And so it's time that we as a country just do this fair and square. Let as many people vote as we can, make it easier for people to vote, and they'll show up, even Republicans.
By the way, millions of people voted by mail for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Millions of people voted by mail for Republicans. And as far as we can tell by the exit polls as they stand right now, Donald Trump appears to have increased the black support and Latino support for him from previous Republican presidential candidates, Dana.
Thanks, Jake. And I want to bring in the House Majority Whip, Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. Mr. Whip, you endorsed Joe Biden in the South Carolina primary. You gave him life in that process, and now he is the president-elect. Your reaction?
Well, I'm very pleased with the results. I'm very ecstatic about what may be the future of this great country of ours. My investment in Joe Biden had everything to do with the restoration of our pursuit towards a more perfect union. I know this is not a perfect country. My God, I'm here. I'm living testimony that the country is not perfect. But we cannot give up on the country. And I could not sit idly by and watch this country take backward steps in that pursuit of perfection. And so I am pleased that we can now get back on course. We need to restore voting rights to people. We need to restore people's lives and livelihoods. This campaign and a few other things before demonstrated that unless the Tocqueville's admonition that this country is great, not because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because it's always been able to restore or to repair its faults. Some fault lines have opened up in education, in healthcare. Even the election 4 years ago opened up a fault line. And this was an opportunity for us to repair that. And so that's what I'm happy about.
You tweeted about Kamala Harris being the vice president-elect and the first woman of color to do that, and about what this means for diversity. Can you talk about the emotions that you feel right now?
I'll tell you, when she was named to the ticket. I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I have 2 granddaughters. And to me, this breaks I see for them and all other daughters and granddaughters in the world. So I was very, very moved by this. Now, Joe and I talked about it several times when he was trying to make his decision. He had it would be a woman. And I don't mind saying now, I said to him in private that I thought that a lot of the results would turn on whether or not that woman be a black woman. I never said that publicly because I don't think you ought to diminish your candidate. And when you ever tell a candidate what he must do in publicly, that diminishes the standing with the public. So I gave all my advice to him in private, but I'm very pleased that it was a black woman selected. I think it cemented his relationship to the black community. And if I may, let me say this about these recent polls about about Donald Trump increasing his vote in the black community, especially black men. I think I know how to gauge that stuff. Not just the barbershops. I have a way of living that keeps me in close contact with the black community. And let me tell you something. When you poll, these were exit polls. The exit polls will not give you what was going on this year. Because more than 80% of African Americans in a lot of communities voted before Election Day.
Well,
if you get your information from the exit polls on Election Day, you do not have an accurate universe.
Well, Mr. Clyburn,
So that's dead wrong.
Okay, just so you know, and we can talk about this later, it's probably not the moment, but the exit polls done were not just Election Day, it was prior to Election Day when early voting started. But let's put that aside right now, because I want to follow up on something that you just said. You revealed for the first time that you urged now President-elect Joe Biden to pick a woman of color. I tried to get you to say that at the time, and many others did. You didn't bite. What was his reaction, aside from the obvious, which is that he acted on it, but in the immediate moments after you made that suggestion, what was his reaction?
Well, he listened. He did not respond to me publicly, and of course, or even privately. Of course, about 2 or 3 days before he made the announcement, he was still talking, and we concluded. I think he said to me, "My heart's in one direction, my head's in the other." I said, "Look, somewhere in private, and see can you bring both of them together."
Which one was his heart and which one was his head, do you think?
I'm never going to tell that.
But you think you know the answer?
I do know the answer. Yeah, I know what he said to me.
Can you give us anything more about those conversations?
No,
Okay.
you can talk them to me.
Well, let's
Okay,
let's look ahead. Well, first of all, let me just ask, have you spoken to President-elect Biden since the news today?
No, I have not spoken with him today. Quite frankly, I was going about my ordinary business. I was real nervous I was never nervous about Pennsylvania. But because of all the litigation, I wanted to see us do less with not having to leave Pennsylvania. And I think we still may be there. But I was more nervous about Arizona than any other place. I don't know what the results have been.
You know how hard it's going to be because you've been in Congress for so long with either party, both parties in charge of either chamber. What is your best piece of advice for Joe Biden as he not only tries to reach across the aisle, but tries to navigate your caucus, where, as you know, based on the call that you had with House Democrats this week, there are a lot of progressives who want their voices heard, but a lot of people who represent moderate districts who just want the leadership of the Democratic Party to listen to them as well.
Look, we got a big tent, and we need to be respectful of each other. I understand all of us have got congressional districts that are different from the other congressional districts. I know a lot of people in the United States Congress that get elected overwhelmingly in their districts that cannot get elected in my district. And there are a lot of districts that I cannot get elected in. And that's what we have to keep in mind, that these congressional districts are different, and therefore people's pursuit of their political reactions and their votes, they're all going to be different. And if you learn anything about being a member of Congress, be in charge of the vote counting and see what you have to do in order to reconcile people's backgrounds and experiences in order to get the votes. And so I'm so tired of all of this progressive versus moderate. Let me tell you something if you got time. My father was a very conservative guy. He used to drill in our heads that if you make $1, son, save a nickel. If you leave the room, turn the lights out, conserve energy. But he was a minister. I never heard him ask his congregations for a conservative offering. He always asked for a liberal offering. So I learned early that conservatism is good in some instances, liberalism is good in other instances. Let's see, can we reconcile those things? This whole notion that I gotta be your way or the highway, you gotta stop that. Our party is not made up of that kind of people. You know, we got, what, 55 African Americans in our caucus? And over on the Republican side, they've got one. And he's now gone. I don't know if they elected another one. So we don't have the same makeup of the caucus. And we've got to stop all this foolishness of it's got to be my way. We got to put this in the bill or I'm not going to vote for it. Come on. That cannot be our future. If so, we're going to be back in the minority and we're going to be stuck in that minority for a long time. Let's respect each other's backgrounds, each other's congressional districts, and give people enough room to represent their districts.
Mr. Clyburn, the House Majority Whip, again, the man who endorsed Joe Biden in the South Carolina Democratic primary at a time where he needed that endorsement and it gave him political life and ultimately the nomination and the presidency. Thank you so much and congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Without
what do you think of that?
Without Majority Whip Clyburn, today would not be happening.
Exactly.
Period. I mean, maybe a different Democrat would have won the nomination and gone on to win, or who knows. But Clyburn is responsible for the Biden presidency.
And for the folks,
Period.
and for the folks at home, he's also the guy who counts the votes in the House of Representatives, so he knows what he's talking about. And he's someone who now has I shouldn't say now. He is a well-respected Democrat and has been for a very long time. But he's in a position where his word and his voice about how Joe Biden navigates the next 4 years as president, navigates the Democratic caucus and the relationship with Republicans is going to carry a lot of weight. And it really matters, I think, Dana, what he said to you at the very end, which is that he wants the party to recognize that it is a coalition party that is made out of liberals and more conservative Democrats. And we should be clear, Jim Clyburn is a congressman from South Carolina. He represents a lot of black voters who are, many of them, more politically conservative than people think. So it is a party that is going to be an amalgamation of a lot of different views, and Joe Biden, it's not going to be easy for him to navigate that, but he's going to have to both deal with his own party and what we were discussing earlier, reach out to Republicans and figure that all out.
But he was warning the progressives in the party kind of on behalf of Joe Biden to, not just go for everything, but understand that progress sometimes takes baby steps and sometimes takes compromise.
Yeah, look, and this is something that we haven't covered much this week because we've been more focused on who the president is going to be, but there is a lot of there's a civil war going on within the House Democratic Party right now. The House Democrats lost a lot of seats ended up losing for a lot of moderate Democrats that were very disappointed. And one of the reasons they were disappointed, and we heard this in the conference call that House Democrats had that was leaking in real time and being reported on by our colleague Manu Raju and others, is there were people like the Congresswoman from Virginia and others from more moderate districts complaining that AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and other members of the so-called squad and others progressives who have done a tremendous amount to bring enthusiasm and ideas to the Democratic Party, but that some of their ideas, especially defunding the police and that notion, hurt Democrats, hurt them in races where the Republicans were able to tie the Democrats to socialism, to the idea of defunding the police. And that was a little speech. He wasn't talking to you.
No, he was definitely not
talking to
talking to me.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar
Yeah.
and AOC and Rashida Tlaib and others.
Which he said privately
Yes.
on that phone call this week, and the fact that he took the chance that we gave him to say it publicly, I thought was very, very telling.
But he's also been saying this for quite some
Sure,
time.
of
I
course.
remember this summer during the George Floyd protests, he was very clear. Defund the police is not a message that Democrats should adopt or that would work for many Democrats across the country. He was crystal clear about that. And this is a man who was himself involved in the civil rights movement back in the 1960s. So he's not just saying that because he's been looking from his ivory tower in Washington. I also think that when Joe Biden said yesterday, when he came out and spoke, not alienating the left and not being seen as overly central or not alienating, the suburban part of the country that he was trying to win back, and he did that. And so that path that he carved out in the general election, they're going to have to figure out a way to turn that into a governing principle that can help him navigate these minefields that he'll face immediately.
He did a
upon
skillful
the
job of
president.
threading the needle, of not alienating the progressives, whereas where the energy is in the party, and not alienating the suburbs of Philadelphia, where he needed the votes.
Yeah, and where he got
And got the votes. He did an able job of threading the needle. I will also say that if he had been running against a less ham-handed opponent, I mean, Donald Trump would go out there and say Cory Booker is going to invade your neighborhood. I mean, like it
Perhaps,
wasn't. They weren't even dog whistles. It was bullhorn racist tropes, and like making Cory Booker, Senator
look,
Booker, the poster child of it. Cory Booker's not exactly Willie Horton.
But President Trump, President Trump got his people out.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
But he didn't win over the suburban
He
ones.
did not win over the
That's
suburban.
what I'm
But his theory of this election was that if Trump has his own people, and if he brings enough of them out, he can win. He got somewhat close, but obviously it was not enough. I do think that there is a choice facing Republicans now about what you're saying, which is, is that message a ham-handed message, or is it the best we've got?
Yeah.
I don't know that they fully settled on what the answer to that is.
I think if you give truth serum to Republican elected leaders, most of them, they will say it's not the best they've got. that it's maybe the opposite of the best they got on that. One thing I want to say, just going back to the whole, the comments that Mr. Clyburn just made about, progressives and moderates, and how he doesn't like those terms, and everyone has to just figure out how to deal together. we know how hard that is going
I
to
don't
be.
like those terms.
we know how hard it's
I
going
mean,
to be.
come on.
I mean, listen. I mean, you know, you allow him to say what he wants. He does want to try to figure out a way to lead
I mean, I don't
the
like
entire
those terms.
party. But what I want to say is that I got a text earlier today, I believe it was, from a very progressive member of Congress who was reminding me, as we were talking about Black voters and how Black voters came out, but also progressive young voters, people of color in urban centers, that was, when we dissect these votes after this election is over and we can have time to do that, that the increase in the voter share for Joe Biden, this member of Congress believes, is going to show that that really helped push him into the presidency, and that those voters and the leaders of those voters, progressive lawmakers, are going to have high expectations that their voices be heard, and that's understandable.
Yeah, I mean, and there. Look, it is true that Joe Biden could not have won the presidency without progressive Democrats who see themselves in the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars of the world.
Yep.
And I know that Jim Clyburn also knows that is true too. But there has to be a negotiation here. I think what those young voters said in this election by coming out for someone who is their polar opposite in a lot of ways, an older, white standard bearer of the old guard, is that they are willing to engage in the political process because it's affected their lives. And so I think on some level there's maybe a silver lining here, which is that if young people came out for Joe Biden, it's because they believe that they know that there's going to have to be some kind of compromise. It's not because Joe Biden said to them, I'm going to be, the far left leader that you've always wanted. I'm going to be contrary to what the president said, he is not going to be a Bernie Sanders light. That is just not who Joe Biden has been for his political life.
And let me just also say, first of all, the progressives did a ton to win this presidency, as you're saying, for Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, was door knocking.
Yep.
Her seat was safe. She was door knocking to get
After
people.
a tough primary, I should say.
After a tough primary,
Yep.
her seat was safe. She was door knocking to get people to vote in Minnesota, to get progressives, to get her people to the polls to vote for Joe Biden, so that Minnesota would not be in play as people thought it would be several months ago. AOC is one of the stars of the Democratic Party, period. And when I had her on State of the Union before the election, she was more disciplined and able than almost any politician I'd interviewed in the previous few months.
Important
in terms of her acknowledgement of where she disagreed with Joe Biden on issues like the Green New Deal, etc. Joe Biden's victory. A lot of relieved people, a lot of happy people, a lot of anti-Trump people, a lot of pro-Biden people. Biden-Harris count the votes, you see.
And luckily a lot of masks.
And a lot of masks. We're seeing a lot of masks, which is good, although the crowds, according to public health officials, not so good. But
Correct.
the masks are good. In any case, what I was going to say is nobody should treat the progressives as if they're a pain, because they are a vital part of the Democratic coalition, period.
Correct.
But that said, there is a reckoning going on because some of the things that were said, especially when it comes to defunding the police, there are more moderate Democrats that think that it made their coalition, their majority, smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And look, this is Minneapolis. They are social distancing while celebrating in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So that's what's going to happen. There's going to be some fighting about this stuff in the Democratic caucus, we heard some warning shots from Congressman Clyburn just then.
And just on what you were talking about Ilhan Omar, even though she didn't have a real race, that she was knocking on doors. Pramila Jayapal, the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, she represents Washington. She didn't have a real race, and yet she is part of an organization. She has an organization where they go out and they train people to knock on doors in battleground states all over. That is a very, very vital part of the progressive movement that we were just talking about that allowed this moment to happen, that fueled this moment.
So, Senator Mitt Romney, who ran for president and lost to Barack Obama and Joe Biden in 2012, just tweeted, Ann and I extend our congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We know both of them as people of goodwill and admirable character. We pray that God may bless them in the days and years ahead. Let's bring in Susan Rice, who was the National Security Advisor didn't mean to surprise you there, Dr. Rice. First of all, get your reaction. You worked with Joe Biden in the Obama-Biden administration. You have been campaigning for him, endorsing him, doing everything you could to get him elected. Your reaction to this moment?
I'm joyous. I'm grateful to the American people. I'm thanking God, and I'm grateful to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for being who they are. They are exactly what our country needs now. We need competence. We need decency. We need honesty. And we need to come together. And that's what they represent. I know this is a painful moment for many who wish for a different outcome. I'm living in a household with some of them. But at this moment, I believe that we have an extraordinary opportunity to move this country forward, to reclaim our leadership in the world, and to address so many of the fundamental challenges we face, from COVID to the economy, to education, to healthcare, to racial justice, and climate change. And this is the moment we have to do so, and we have to heal in the process.
I want to ask you about your son is a somewhat notable conservative figure in the country, and I want to ask you about his disappointment in a second. But I do also want to first ask you, if you don't mind, as a black woman, we now have a black woman vice president-elect. It has never happened in the history of this country, and I'm just wondering if you could. I know you prefer to talk policy and you prefer to talk politics, but I'm just at national security. But I'm just wondering if you'll indulge me and our viewers, as a black woman, what does this moment mean to you?
It's amazing. It's amazing. It brings tears to my eyes and joy to my heart. And my, almost 18-year-old daughter that feels thrilled. I know there are young girls, and I hope young boys all over this country who see themselves in her and the opportunity for them to be who they want to be. I could not be more proud of Kamala Harris and all that she represents for all of us. This is
Monday. If you don't see that evidence on Monday, that also tells you something. That's again why I say our system holds, our system works.
Breakfast time.
Senator,
Let's
if you don't
go,
like the final result,
Senator Mitt Romney, former presidential candidate, tweeted, Ann and I extend our congratulations to President Vice President Kamala Harris. We know both of them as people of goodwill and admirable character. We pray that God may bless them in the days and years ahead. Ari, you've been inside White House. Inside this White House, how much is the pressure, will the pressure build? If they start hearing Republicans, not just Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney, but other Republicans saying, Mr. President, and how does that look on the inside?
I believe in decency in all matters, and I think the decent thing to do is let the president himself take the time he wants to absorb. It is not easy, and it is extraordinarily close. So if the president needs to take a few days, maybe even longer, to absorb, ultimately accept, and I think he ultimately will accept the outcome of the people, you have to allow that to happen. And President Trump has always just cut from a different cloth, a much more aggressive, argumentative cloth than a typical Republican. And so let him do it at his own pace. And I think it'd be a mistake to try to demand that President Trump tonight give a concession speech. Let it go at the pace that keeps people together in this country.
Just one more thought on a particular state, and that's Arizona, Ari. Congratulations coming in from Cindy McCain today, who sided with Joe Biden in this race. She said, congratulations to our dear friend, Joe Biden. Obviously, the McCain issue in Arizona was a factor here. There's no doubt.
I think there were several factors in Arizona, and this goes back to 2016. The Mormon vote, which is a considerable vote in Arizona, has never been strongly in support of Donald Trump. He underperformed in Utah, he underperformed in Arizona, both in 16 and in 20. The McCain factor, I think, is a factor, but I think there are other things that play too. But one final thought. In 2016, after Donald Trump won by a big margin and won legitimately, the Democrats' instant reaction was to protest in the streets, to launch the resistance, to seek to overturn the results in the Electoral College, to boycott his inaugural. While it is fair and proper to congratulate Joe Biden, it is also right to criticize the Democrats who put the nation through 4 years of misery because they never accepted Donald Trump's legitimacy in 2016.
I just want to point out on the screen right now, Chuck Schumer in the middle of New York City, obviously rejoicing over the outcome of this election, and we're just going to continue to hear from all of these people across the country getting their reaction, but clearly having Chuck Schumer in Times Square, just a couple blocks from where we are right
That's the
now.
next battle. Ari, thank you very much for your comments. Let's bring in our panel. Marie Harf, Executive Director of Serve America PAC, Fox News contributor, and Mark Thiessen, also a Fox News contributor. Marie, I will credit you here that even in the dark days of the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary, when everybody was saying you're doing what? You think Joe Biden is going to win? You said, yes, I think he's going to win. And now you have a president-elect Joe Biden who has a challenge ahead to try to unite the country, not only the country, but also the Democratic Party, Marie.
That's right, and even since those early days of the primary where it looked like such a long shot for Joe Biden, his campaign strategy never wavered. And that's pretty significant, even after COVID hit, even after we had all of this racial upheaval this summer. Jen O'Malley Dillon, his campaign manager, led a strategy that essentially said to the American people, Joe Biden is the one candidate who can unite the Democratic Party, all of those different factions of the party, can bring in independents and disaffected Republicans, those people like Cindy McCain. And after, Jim Clyburn really helped Joe Biden pull ahead in that South Carolina primary, put him on a glide path to the nomination, that strategy never wavered. And so a lot of people deserve credit today for this Joe Biden victory. But it is amazing that, one thing we always talk about after these elections is discipline and strategy. And the Biden team maintained that through all of the ups and downs of what has been, by any account, an incredible year and a really unprecedented year in many ways. Let's bring Mark Thiessen. Mark, your thoughts today on this enormous news and big moment in the country?
Well, first of all, I congratulate Joe Biden on his victory. I know him very well. I worked with him for 7 years when I was a staffer on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He was the ranking member, and he worked with Jesse Helms, who at the time was the most conservative of conservatives, and passed legislation together. So, when he says he wants to unite the country, reach across the aisle, bring people together, I hope that's what he does. He's capable of doing it, and I hope that's the direction he goes. In terms of the election, the reality is if it weren't for Donald Trump being on the ballot, this would have been over before it began. I mean, if you think about what was going into this election, we were running this election in the middle of the worst pandemic since 1918, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst race riots since the 1960s, and yet Donald Trump came super close to winning this election. He shouldn't have even been in it. But the fact is that the fact that it was so close shows that it was a winnable race, and he lost. And the reason I think he lost, if we go back and look back at this race, the moment that he lost that race was September 29th in that first debate. Because there were the people who decided this race, in my view, were the reluctant Trump voters. You saw all these polls saying 59% of Americans say they're better off now than they were 4 years ago, but at least 10% of those people weren't voting for Donald Trump. He never really worked that hard to expand his coalition beyond his base. He had the most loyal base, has still the most loyal base in the history of presidential politics, but he needed more than that base to win, and a lot of those people were frustrated with his fights with reporters during the COVID briefings, and then after that, 74 million people tuned in to see what Donald Trump would say. And a lot of people turned off the TV and just said, I don't want 4 more years of this chaos. If he had performed in that first debate the way he did in the second debate, I think we might have a very different result today.
Kaya humingi dahil nanalo si Biden.
What would you write for the president-elect?
Oo, yan. Maglakad kayo sa kalsada.
Well, first of all, I would write a gracious concession speech, and I would also write a speech with the thought that I am the first president since probably Grover Cleveland who has a chance to come back in 4 years and win back the presidency.
Oh, you're right.
And we
We're
all
all Trump. I already said you about Biden. But
Racist yan.
I'll let you know.
Racist yan.
For Joe Biden, sorry.
Sa ano siya?
For a Democrat, so it was my mistake. If I was writing for Joe Biden, I would write deliver a very gracious speech and talk about unity and talk about the fact that we now need to bring the country together and that he plans to reach it.
Maraming puting mayaman.
He plans to reach across the aisle and work with Republicans and try and bring the country together, and that basically what he was saying during the campaign. He needs to now deliver it. That's why the Georgia Senate races are so important, is because Joe Biden is, if the Democrats pick up one of those 2 seats, that's all they need to win the Senate majority. Joe Biden is going to be under unrelenting pressure from the progressive base to enact their agenda, to get rid of the filibuster, to pack the courts, to pack the Senate, to pass radical legislation. I honestly think Joe Biden would probably prefer to work with Mitch McConnell because it lifts all that pressure from the left of his base. It insulates him, and he has to reach across the aisle, which is what he's good at. So a Republican Senate, I think he could get a lot done with, and it would really unify the country.
Thanks to you both. Good to have you here. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Jonathan Hunt is live in North Las Vegas. We got, again, these challenges are continuing, including in a place like Nevada. Jonathan?
Yeah, Brett, we had the first court hearing on a Republican federal lawsuit late yesterday. Now, there were basically 2 planks on which Republican lawyers were seeking relief in that lawsuit. The first one involved signature verification, but as we said on Thursday when it was first introduced, this lawsuit, it was based on scant evidence. One individual woman who claimed her ballot had been stolen from her, submitted by somebody else for her. But as the judge pointed out to the Republican lawyers yesterday, that instance was investigated by the Clark County Registrar here. They interviewed the woman, they determined the signature did match hers, they gave her the opportunity to officially challenge that. In a statement, she declined to do so, so the judge dismissed that, essentially. Then the other one was transparency. Again, the Republican evidence was one allegedly credentialed member of the media saying that he's legally resident in Nevada. Now, interestingly, although it was mentioned in passing in the lawsuit filed, it did not come up in yesterday's court hearing at all. So that is still out there. Grinnell said that they had written to the DOJ making these allegations, but maybe the Republicans have backed off a little bit because we and others have gone through that list, and we and others, including election officials here, have pointed out that many on those lists were actually active or appear to be active duty military who are posted elsewhere but have every right to vote legally as Nevada residents. Brett?
All right, Jonathan, thank you. We should point out the spread there is more than 20,000 still in Nevada, and that's the challenge in all of these challenges. Let's bring back Andy McCarthy, former assistant U.S. Attorney, Fox News contributor, as we look live in Philadelphia. And that's the deal with all of these legal challenges. Of course you have a day in court. Of course you can present evidence if you have. But can it move enough ballots or invalidate, because of some concerns, enough ballots to change the outcome in a state? In a place like Nevada, that's roughly 22,000. In a place like Pennsylvania, it looks like it's going to be north of 40,000, 50,000. That's the big deal.
Yeah, it really is. It has to make a difference. And I think the other thing that they're gonna run into in terms of a brick wall, this occurred to me when you were talking to Juan Williams a few moments ago. As he pointed out, the Democrats, if you put President Trump to the side, the Democrats lost this election. You know, they lost the Senate, we'll see what happens in January, and they lost seats in the House. It's going to be hard for people to swallow the idea that there was a massive fraud scheme if it turns out that, you know, they forgot as part of the scheme to make sure that the Democrats held the Senate
or took the Senate and advanced their position in the House. So I just think, it's very uphill.
Andy, what about the pressure on this president? He is a fighter. He has said he's not going to concede. You heard Rudy Giuliani earlier. What do you think builds here as we hear from the president-elect now, Joe Biden, and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris tonight?
Well, we're already hearing, Brett, as you just pointed out, a little bit of retreat in their legal position. They're totally entitled to have recounts, especially in these states that are close. It would be a very good thing for the country, regardless of how it impacts this election, for the Supreme Court to rule on the Pennsylvania case, because that would straighten out, at least for future purposes, whether a court has the right to change state election law. So that would be good. But I think, we'll have to see what they're able to prove in court. But if they're not able to advance the ball, and in fact, what it looks like over the next few days is that either the claims are collapsing or they simply don't have enough extent of fraud that they can actually challenge the margins by which they've lost these states, I think then at a certain point it becomes hopeless, and when it becomes hopeless and the president comes to terms with that, if that happens, then I think he'll have to concede.
Thanks, Andy.
Let's bring back Chris Wallace, Fox News Sunday anchor, Dana Perino, host of the Daily Briefing, co-host of 5, Juan Williams, also Fox News political analyst, co-host of 5. Chris, now we start to look forward, right? And this transition time is a time when the Biden camp will start playing the parlor game of who's going to be Secretary of Defense, who's going to be filling out the cabinet. You're already hearing names like Michelle Flournoy at the Pentagon, the first possible female defense secretary. This is where we will be shortly, even as these legal challenges are going forward.
Absolutely. We're told now that on Monday, the first thing that President-elect Biden is going to do is he's going to name a coronavirus task force and to basically make the message that more important than a chief of staff, more important than some of those cabinet positions that you're talking about, is we're going to take this COVID crisis facing the country seriously, and we're going to deal with it. And I think you're going to see them roll out some policy ideas, some personnel ideas, and make it clear, regardless of what the president does, they're moving full ahead. In these closing moments, I just want to say one thing. The power of what we are seeing right now. I mean, you had Ari Fleischer and Mark Thiessen, two rock-rib Republican fighters, and they began their appearances here today on Fox saying, congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden. Here we have on Fox the chyron at the bottom of the screen, the headline, Joe Biden, elected 46th President of the United States. On Fox, you see these, the crowd celebrating in the streets of New York and other cities across the country. There's a tremendous momentum. We just called this race just before noon. It's just before 2 in the East now, and there's a tremendous momentum that is already picking up that Joe Biden is the duly elected president of the United States. President Trump may be digging in his heels, and he may have his lawyers out. But there was a fictional bartender named Mr. Dooley around the turn of the century, and he famously said a quote that lived long after the stories about Mr. Dooley that said the Supreme Court follows the election returns. And you kind of think with all of this momentum going up and around the country and in the news media that it's going to be awfully hard for any judge, let alone a Supreme Court justice, to put their foot in the door unless there is very strong evidence
Vice President dati ni Obama.
Election fraud, and we've seen none of that so far.
All right, Chris, thank you. We have Carl Rove on the phone, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff. Fox News contributor, been with us throughout this ride. Carl, your thoughts on this day?
So much.
Well, every 4 years, America goes through a ceremony of democracy where we go to the polls and elect the president or re-elect the president. And this is apparently the end of that process this year. Pennsylvania elevated President Trump and elevated Vice President Joe Biden to the job that he has sought for many, many decades. And we all wish him well. He becomes our president next January 20th.
Bam talaga, oh.
So much more depends upon the acts of the president and our government, the symbol of our government, and like Michael Arner,
Ayan, atakihin pa si Evelyn dahil si Trump ang ginawa mo.
and he will now be the president of the royal family, and the will be the first president of any American.
So, Carl, what advice would you give President Trump today?
No, ma'am. One term.
Well,
4 years lang, ma'am. 4 years.
He has the right to examine what he believes is the situation that he was faced with, the treatment that he feels his campaign was given. And he has the right to
45 other presidents.
legitimate
Always
complaints.
two terms. Lagi na re-elect.
Trey Gowdy said so eloquently last night, I thought, this is one of the great majesties of America.
Nanalo.
We have every person, no matter how high or how low.
Actually, si Nixon, 2 terms din, kaya lang na
That he has been the one in this situation, he has access to the court. This is a pretty significant judgment, and, you know, then we have more states to settle, and the race may tighten some, and then there will certainly be more votes added to President Trump's vote. And he will be forever one of 45
every Saturday nandito si Evelyn.
46 who served as the president.
Kasi may ibang work siya.
And activity and a little bit of deception, which is what you saw in the banking system.
Bigyan ko parang sa Evelyn, ma'am.
When was there laws that now look
Kasi may work siya, di ba?
yes, nothing to, you know,
Sige na, kain ka naman.
And we all thought this was going to be a big blue wave. They told us it was going to be a huge margin for Joe Biden. Instead, it's come down to a pretty small number of votes in 6 states. And there's a lot that he's accomplished and a lot he has to be proud of. But some people win and some people lose, and this appears to be a big law.
And Carl, last thing quickly, what do you say to conservatives who now look to Georgia and these 2 runoff Senate races and are fearful as they look at the presidential vote in Georgia about potentially losing control of the Senate and changing this dynamic that everybody's talking about a split government?
Well, it's a warning. If you care about having a reasonable governor on the passions of
To do it for now.
then you gotta worry about Georgia. And
Until
you gotta worry
lunchtime.
about the 50 Republicans on the Senate today, 48 Democrats, and the outcome of Georgia could determine, could literally put the Democrats in charge of all 3 the House, the Senate, and the White House. And you're a conservative like there ain't any worry about, which is why I accepted yesterday a request from the chairman of the Senate Republican Campaign Committee.
Baka hindi nga mo gusto yun eh. Minsan, may banana nga, kaya lang, okay.
You have your finger in a lot of stuff there, Carl. We appreciate your time, your thoughts. Thank you. Dana and Juan still here with us. I shouldn't mind all of these calls to congratulate the president-elect, the vice president-elect. We have seen, as Chris mentioned, Ari and Mark and tweets from Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush, Dana. But if we look back to 2016, there were not a lot of Democrats congratulating the then president-elect Donald Trump. In fact, 2+ years of a Russia investigation that said he was pretty much illegitimate. So it's worth just putting in context all of that.
Well, graciousness is a wonderful thing, and you either have it or you don't. And I don't think it's good to compare your graciousness to somebody else's, but you could be aware of it. And that's where it stands. I do want to mention, Donna Brazil spoke so movingly about what this moment means to her and to Black Americans and to women. It really is something, and I learned about bipartisanship from actually Donna Brazil and Karl Rove in 2005 when I was the deputy press secretary. Hurricane Katrina had happened. There was a tremendous pressure.
Hello guys, thank you for watching. I put in the TV so that you know They celebrate right now the victory of Joe Biden.
Together, it can be done. And so today,
It's amazing. Yay! Congratulations, congratulations, the new president.
So understandable, and that I understand broken hearts, and I just pray that everybody can feel a little bit better about where we stand in America at the end of this term.
And we've got the naked cowboy in the middle of Times Square playing his guitar. Juan Williams, as we put a picture up that Dr. Jill Biden, who will be the next First Lady of the United States, has tweeted out moments ago. She's covering up the word vice on a sign that they probably have had around the house because he's now he's the president-elect, Dr. and President Biden. It says live here. Quick thought, Juan.
Well, I just wanted to mention, Joe Biden got more than 80 million votes. In our lifetimes, I think the closest is Barack Obama. He got 69 million. So this is an amazing performance, and he's won, if we look at the numbers now, by plus 4%. Again, an astounding margin in terms of that popular vote. So I just wanted, I think that we all have to have some grace about us and some sense of national unity at this moment.
Yeah.
So congratulations to him, to his wife, and to Mrs. Harris. Boy, what a victory for her.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. I'd like to say thanks to the team here at Fox, and it's been a pleasure being alongside you, Martha, for election night, which turned into election week.
And you as well, Brett.
We're not done yet.
We have a great team, and we have a lot more to cover in this story, so we thank you at home for going along with this ride for us. We'll be back at 8 o'clock tonight. Keep it here for our continuing coverage.
Next, a special edition of America's Newsroom with Sandra Smith and Tracy Gallagher. Again, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris.
There you see reaction in the streets as the race for the White House comes to a close. Fox News projecting that Joe Biden will be the 46th president of the United States thanks to projected wins in Pennsylvania and Nevada. Welcome to our Democracy 2020 special coverage. I'm Tracy Gallagher in Los Angeles. Sandra, good day to you.
And good afternoon to you, Trace. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. Everything changed in the 11 a.m. hour on the East Coast this afternoon, now making Joe Biden the president-elect of the United States. President Trump, however, said that he will continue to fight, saying in a statement today that his campaign will begin prosecuting his case on Monday. John Roberts is live at the White House with the very latest from there. John, good afternoon.
Sandra, Trace, good afternoon to you. Talking with folks in the Trump campaign and on his legal team in the last couple of hours. And the case that they're making is, first of all, they're saying we shouldn't be calling this because the legal challenges are still out there, and that they believe that there are a lot of votes that could potentially be in question, and they plan to make legal challenges beginning on Monday. Clearly, though, this was something that the Trump campaign knew was likely going to happen because they had a statement that was ready and was sent out moments after the call was made earlier today in the 11 o'clock hour. Through the campaign, the president saying, beginning Monday, our campaign will start prosecuting our case in court to ensure election laws are free, upheld, and the rightful winner is seen the American people in times of an honest election. That means counting all legal ballots and not counting any illegal ballots. This is the only way to ensure that the public has full confidence in our election. I was speaking with Rudy Giuliani in the past hour here at the press conference in Philadelphia not too long ago. He says that they're going to file a number of cases beginning on Monday to try to get access to votes and to argue about the vote count. They believe that there wasn't enough transparency in the vote count, that there may be some ballots that went through that shouldn't have gone through. I asked Giuliani, but how many ballots are we talking about here? And he thinks that there's about 135,000 votes in Philadelphia that went through without the proper observation, and more than 300,000 in Pittsburgh. And another development too, the president tweeted about this, ballots that came in Pennsylvania after 8 p.m. on election day. That was the subject of a case that was before the Supreme Court. Justice Samuel Alito ordered election officials in Pennsylvania to sequester those ballots for future considerations. And we don't know if will those ballots be subject to observation and checking, could those ballots be thrown out in a tranche. But here's what the Trump campaign is arguing right now. They believe that not every legal ballot has been counted. They do not believe that every illegal ballot has been excluded. Now, where they run into a little bit of trouble here is with evidence. There is not evidence of widespread election fraud at this point, but the Trump campaign and their legal team, and again I spoke with them just in the last few minutes, are making the case that they haven't had a chance to see the evidence, and until they do, they won't know exactly what's out there. So that's what's going to happen from the Trump campaign side over the days and potentially weeks ahead. Sandra, Trace?
All right, John Roberts live at the White House. We hear the horns behind you there. This is a scene that is happening across the country. A live look at Madison, Wisconsin there. John Roberts, thank you. We'll see you again in a bit. Trace?
Meantime, President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris will be speaking to the nation tonight. Peter Ducey, who's been following the Biden campaign from the start, is live in Wilmington, Delaware with the latest. Peter.
And Trace, in this most unusual campaign season that has now officially come to an end, we understand, based on some social media traffic, that more than 100 Biden staffers are celebrating by dancing together on a Zoom. We have also now seen a photo on Dr. Jill Biden's Twitter page where it shows the president-elect and the first lady-elect standing there holding up a sign that says, President Biden lives here, and he's wearing a hat that says, we just did 46. We've also heard a little bit more from him today. He put out a statement. I'm going to read it to you in full. It says, I'm honored and humbled by the trust the American people have placed in me and Vice President-elect Harris. In the face of unprecedented obstacles, a record number of Americans voted, proving once again that democracy beats deep in the heart of America. With the campaign over, it's time to put the anger and the harsh rhetoric behind us and come together as a nation. It's time for America to unite and to heal. We are the United States of America, and there's nothing we can't do if we do it together. The campaign obviously did not have a heads up, really, that the calls were going to start coming in for them when they did, because the campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dillon, was on a jog on an unseasonably warm day here in the Wilmington area when her mom called her and told her that she just saw on TV that they had won. There was another phone call that we've seen a clip of that is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden right when it happened.
You did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
There are about 100, 150 Biden supporters who have showed up there as close as they can get to this location that's been locked down by the Secret Service. They've got blue balloons, they've got Biden and Harris signs, cars are driving by and honking and being waved along by the Secret Service and by the Wilmington police as they try to keep this area as locked down as they can. Ahead of Mars tonight, we understand, at around 8 p.m., the Biden campaign is going to invite 400 cars filled with supporters in for a drive-in style event. The stage is surrounded by some preset vehicles, a couple of Jeeps and Jeep pickups and American-made big trucks that have seats either on the top or in the flatbeds of the truck. That's where the Biden special guests are going to be when Kamala Harris speaks. And as for the first time as the Vice President-elect, and then Joe Biden for the first time as President-elect. We think that's going to go off around 8 p.m. Trace?
Peter Ducey, we will be watching live for us in Wilmington, Delaware. Peter, thank you for more insight. Let's bring in Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace. Chris, it is great to see you. You watch, and while you're on one side of the screen, we've got the celebration in the streets, Biden supporters on the other side of the screen, and then you have at the White House, far from conceding, the Trump campaign saying it's going to prosecute this case in court beginning on Monday. Clearly, it's a heavy lift, Chris. You had Professor Jonathan Turley equating it to hunting elephants with a derringer, saying the Trump campaign needs a bit higher caliber to go after this. What do you think?
Well, let's first talk about the big story, which is that Joe Biden has been elected the 46th president of the United States. Back in 1980, I was covering the Reagan campaign, and I was there the night that Ronald Reagan went from being the former governor of California to being the president-elect. And you can just feel it in the air. There's more Secret Service. They take their job. Not saying they didn't take it seriously, but there's an increased intensity. And you have people who have been very close, who in that case called him Ron, or called him governor, somebody called him Mr. President-elect or Mr. President. And you know, you just have a sense that there's a gravitational pull, and suddenly this man is about to be the leader of the free world, who was up to that moment just a candidate. So I promise you there is a different feeling in Wilmington, Delaware right now than there was a couple of hours ago before this call was made, even though everybody expected this is how it was going to end up over the last couple of days. As far as President Trump is concerned, you know, as we've been saying ever since the call was made, he has every right to pursue his legal remedies and, you know, go to the courts first at the state level, federal district level, appeals court, maybe even eventually to the Supreme Court. But as Jonathan Turley was suggesting, you've got to have really strong evidence, and you have to have evidence, one, of serious fraud, and then two, that it has to be of a dimension that would overturn results. Remember back in Florida, we were talking about a differential between Bush and Gore of 500 votes. Here we're talking in Pennsylvania about tens of thousands of votes. Same in Nevada, same in Arizona. We don't see any of that so far. Not saying it's not going to happen, but we sure haven't seen it so far.
I just want to read you very quickly this former President Barack Obama releasing this statement reads in part, so I encourage every American to give him a chance and lend him your support. Speaking of the president-elect, the election results at every level show that the country remains deeply and bitterly divided. It'll be up to not just Joe and Kamala, but each of us to do our part to reach out beyond our comfort zone, listen to others, lower the temperature, find some common ground from which to move forward. All of us remembering that we are one nation under God. Your final thoughts on that? We're divided. Very much so, Chris. It doesn't seem like the elixir is easily at hand.
No, I mean, you just look at the returns. Donald Trump, as the losing candidate, will have gotten more votes. And you know the Trump supporters feel just as passionately as the people out in the street supporting celebrating Joe Biden's victory. Feel just as passionately. People have more votes than anybody in the history of this country, except for Joe Biden in this election. 7 million Americans supported Donald Trump, and they're going to take his loss very bitterly. They feel just as passionately for him as these people do for Biden. How do you bridge that divide? And I think former President Obama is right. It takes Joe Biden reaching out, and one hopes that Donald Trump will help in that reconciliation as well, and people in the halls of power in Congress and in the streets of America. Because, you know, it's a cliche, but there's so much more that unites us than divides us, and you just hope everybody on both sides will remember that.
Chris Wallace, great to see you, sir. Thank you. Good insight. Be sure to tune in Fox News Sunday tomorrow. Chris will talk to Utah Senator Mitt Romney. Check your local listings for time and check.
Thank you, Trace. Joining us now to talk about all this is the Trump campaign's legal strategist, Trump 2020 advisory board member, and member of President Trump's legal team, Harmeet Dillon. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for being here. First of all, have you spoken with the president today?
No, I have not spoken with the president, but I have spoken to some of my colleagues in the battleground states about what's happening there. And yes, indeed, there will be litigation. And it is not just about fraud. And so, you know, to correct what Chris Wallace just said, one does not have to prove massive fraud to get into the courts. And the Bush-Gore dispute in 2000, it was over whether ballots should be counted or not whether voters committed fraud. That's the issue in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, there is a violation of our constitutional definition of who decides whether certain ballots that are received after the fact are counted or not. And that is indeed tens of thousands. And so whether those ballots are counted or not remains a crucial issue in that state. And in some other states, we have seen, for example, overnight in one county, 6,000 votes swing in the opposite direction because of a so-called computer glitch. So when that type of irregularity occurs, I think it is fair to take a pause and make sure that we do recounts in the states where that's statutorily required or permissible, as happened in 2016 with the Hillary Clinton and President Trump election. And let that process play out before we declare victory.
President Trump, beginning Monday, our campaign will start prosecuting our case in court.
So I'd like to see it play out before we conclude it.
How many lawsuits has the Trump campaign filed since Election Day, would you say? What is the outstanding number?
You know, they're flying fast and furious, but it isn't that many. It's in the handful of states that are remaining. And so there have been multiple litigations, a couple of which we won in Pennsylvania already over the counting in Philadelphia. There was a lawsuit filed in Nevada. There may be other lawsuits filed in Pennsylvania concerning equal protection or other types of issues. There may be litigation in Georgia. There already has been litigation in Georgia. And in Georgia, there are some issues concerning so-called curing of the ballots and curing of the ballots by one party but not the other. That is an issue in some states as well. So, of course, at the end of the day, these will all play out. The courts will have a say one way or the other, and then I think people need to accept the outcome. As you just pointed out on your show, a huge number of Americans voted for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, and I want people on both sides to accept this outcome. That's not going to happen if it looks like there's a cover-up or a rush to judgment.
Right now, obviously, the case, the point is that there's not evidence of that voter fraud, or at least widespread evidence of voter fraud. And there's a new Trump campaign statement that came out in just the last couple of hours, and it says what this means is counting all legal ballots and not counting any illegal ballots. So you're making the case that you haven't even been provided the opportunity to find evidence of voter fraud. So how do you plan to do that, to prove this in courts?
That's actually not what I said. There actually is evidence of fraud. There are individual affidavits that are being filed or will be filed in court with these lawsuits.
Where have you found that?
I don't telegraph my legal strategy in advance. When they are filed in court, you can read them, and as you've already said on your show just a few minutes ago, lawsuits will be filed on Monday. And so where you have affidavits from voters saying that somebody voted in their name already, or that they were excluded, or that their ballot was discarded wrongfully, that's the type of evidence. And it's not for the media to judge that, it's for a court to judge it, and we'll get a judgment from courts one way or the other. There will be more finality around this election.
All right, Harmony, we appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And now for a response from the other side, let's bring in Democratic strategist Kevin Wallen. He has close ties to the Biden campaign leadership. Kevin, always good to see you. You just heard the other side of the president's campaign. Clearly, they want to prosecute this case in court, despite the fact that Joe Biden is now the president-elect. I know you talked to the members of the Biden campaign. You get insight there. Do they plan to continue, Kevin, the ground game on the ground in the states, making sure the votes are counted, making sure this process goes forward, despite the fact that this election has been called in this favor?
Absolutely, Trace. We want every vote to be counted across each of these states, to Armin's point, because we want to make it abundantly clear that Joe Biden is the president-elect of this country, duly elected in all of these battleground states that are being called, as well as Kamala Harris is the vice president-elect. So we will adjudicate this starting tomorrow, responding to whatever lawsuits the Trump campaign files. But again, as the networks have called it, as more departments have called it, we are seeing the same kind of votes coming out of these key counties, making sure that the vice president is now the president-elect.
You also say you have friends in the Trump campaign.
Ano ma, okay ka lang?
You say they're scrambling because they don't have one unifying figure to take.
Kain ka lang, ma'am. Enjoy a good day. Look, it's beautiful outside.
For President Bush back
We celebrate!
Yeah. Ang ma'am, may issue. Ano issue, ma'am?
between then and now. For
Sige
one
na.
thing, all
Sige na,
the
ito ba?
voters have been counted,
Yes.
and they've been
Yes,
counted, and they've been counted, and it's time to end the process. That's not exactly the message that I heard on election night, and so I think it's pretty hard to be against counting the votes there. What are your thoughts on that, Devin?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Trace. And to former Secretary Baker's point, George Bush was leading in Florida. That's not the condition here that we're seeing in 2020, where the vice president, now President-elect Joe Biden, is leading in all these key battleground states. That is operating not from a deficit, but from a point of power in terms of going to these courts. And again, to
Ang dami.
ask Armina to
Hindi ko lang nilagay ko.
multiple
Kaliwa.
instances
Ano yung type yun? Oo nga, magkano nga?
examples of that.
Hindi,
Just yet,
tinang sa online
PC,
naman. Kinuha mo sa online? Oo,
Pennsylvania,
binili ko. Gusto na ano ka ng ano mo, masalan? Oo. Maganda,
Oo
pagkagtaguan.
Talaga, waterproof nga. Gusto mo
Waterproof, gusto mo yan?
Oo. Mamaya ilo ko. Paano yun? Saan? Saan? Amazon?
Hindi, Ebe.
Oh, pero brand new.
Brand new.
Wala ko ba? Ang ginamit na natin.
Hindi, oh. Brand new yun.
Maganda nga. Ba't di mo ginagamit pag lumalabas ka rin
Oo, may pati-pati ginagamit ko. Tagal, yung ganda, marami na gusto.
Sige nga, oo, baka
magkano? $20, $30? Okay na.
Siguro.
Ha? Okay lang yan. Okay lang. Sige, sabihin mo sa akin. Oo. Eh, paano bayaran kita na lang? Bigay ko sa yung cash. Sabihin mo sa akin.
Tingnan ko price. Bibigyan mo lang po ng 30 parang shipping.
Oh yeah. Pero magkano? Sabihin mo sa akin kung magkano. Okay na.
Balik mo sa iyo yan kung magkano bigyan.
Okay. Kahit yeah. Sabihin mo lang pa lahat.
Oo. Mamaya mag-order ako.
The Trump campaign. But again, I think that card has left the station here with regards to trying to reverse any of these numbers. It's much more difficult, as you know, Trace, from a legal perspective, to actually throw out votes once they've been tabulated and once they've been counted. So regardless of who they get from a level of experience, I think it's just not an upward battle that they're going to be successful with.
I wonder if the pressure starts to mount, and you have people like Lindsey Graham coming out saying, you know, at least acknowledging that elect, and we've had reports that are saying Trump
Ang canceling ganun din. Kahit anong sabihin ng ma'am, wala nang filter, wala na.
Sabi ko kani, Ben, sino na sinabi kasi para matigil siya ba, makikinig na.
Kahit ano ba sabihin minsan ng mga sita.
Tatago ako sa kwarto.
Ay, gaging. Kaya ako tatago ko ng basura sa laundry. Okay, bago ako yun. Basura, pagkain yan mga pagkain.
Ano yung nagawa ba yun?
Pagkainin niyo. Supply niyo ng pagkain lang.
Okay ka lang? Okay ka lang?
Oo, wala ba yun? Pagkain niyo lang lang.
Ay, nilaan ko lang. Sisigawan sila. Ano yung kape mo?
Ano yan?
Wala. Labada ma. Labada.
Naubos mo na lang.
Galing ha. Dumi ka na yan. Ay, bibigay ko nga pa yung gamot. Buti naman, naubos mo yung almusal mo.
And then we know there's this issue out there, hanging out there with respect to the Biden family and what the Republicans may do in the Senate. Look, I'm just saying this is an issue.
Ginawan ka pa din?
I'm suggesting Republicans should pause a little bit before they go hog wild into doing what the Democrats did 4 years ago.
Sakit ang heart mo?
I would agree on that. I will say that something has to be done to give relief to the community.
Makain ka ba ng bayabas? Oo. Makain ka ng bayabas? Saka ano, lemon?
Bisa kita masama pagkaramdam niya, B. Pwede. Sabi niya.
Saan masakit ka?
Dito.
Hindi, kumain ka na yung ibukas mo na yung pagkain mo. Tapos magpahinga ka lang.
Okay. Alert ka lang yun. Masakit siya mo, Dad? Ay, nako. Dapat pinigil na natin yung may inilalakas. Kasi Dad, huwag ka na may klasan si Ben. Hawakan mo to para dito sa pagkain, okay?
Look, there's going to be some culture war stuff.
Masakit dito, Dad.
It's not going to like. We're going to have to
Meron pang masakit, iba? Sa ulo, sa pangkamay, saan? Ito lang? Ito lang?
Mamaya pagkain ka lang. Para malagyan ng pagkain niya. Masubside yung
kasi marami ka nang nadumi. Ngayon, lumalabas, okay?
When I was in the White House,
Inom ka na ng gamot, sandali. Inom ka
Ano ba?
Inom ka ng gamot, ma.
Big kilala yan tayo lahat. Therapy ka, ikaw si Billy.
Kilala.
Ano pangalan ko?
Anong pangalan nito? Aba. Ako, anong pangalan ko?
Rosana.
Aba, maliwanag pa isip ka sa umaga eh.
Mamaya
wala na. Ano, tingnan ako. Eh, meron ka talaga ng kapibahan dito. Wala ko ako ah.
anyone who stands in the way of trying to help American people right now in a really difficult time does so at
Sino yan? Ano mo yan? Hindi, ano mo?
Ako. Bakit?
Ipagtatapos
Tama na. Bye guys. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye. Congratulations for Biden. Bye. God bless America, the new president. Yay! Thank you. Bye-bye.